Out in the cold void between galaxies, where stars blink like dying embers and silence is the only law, there exists a truth whispered in dread among alien warlords and battle-hardened fleets alike. Never underestimate humanity. They came late to the galactic stage, small, soft-skinned, fragile by cosmic standards. No natural armor, no muscles, no psychic dominance or hive-mind coordination. Just flesh, bone, and stubborn will. And yet they won. Not with overwhelming numbers. Not with godlike tech gifted by ancient precursors. But with something far more terrifying, adaptability. The kind that turns farmers into snipers, teachers into tacticians, and children into legends. When every other species fights to survive, humans fight to win, even when the universe says it's impossible. This is not a story about heroes draped in glory. It's about warriors forged in mud, blood, and impossible odds. About aliens who thought they understood war, until they met Earth's most lethal asset, its soldiers. Now listen closely, because what you're about to read is a myth. It's report, recovered from shattered comms logs, battlefield drones, and the trembling testimonies of those who lived just long enough to warn their kin. Do not engage the humans on the ground. Do not let them dig in. Do not give them time. And above all, do not let them smile. Because when a human smiles in the middle of hell, it means they've already won. The Krell Dominion had conquered 300 star systems without firing a single shot on half of them. Their reputation alone, sleek obsidian warforms, gravity-warping dreadnoughts, and neural command legions that moved as one mind, was enough to make lesser species kneel. They believed war was geometry, superior positioning, flawless execution, absolute control. Emotion was weakness. Mercy was inefficiency. And fear? Fear was a tool used only against prey. So when their scouts reported a lone human outpost on the ice-locked moon of Vexor 7, the high strategist of the 7th Convergence Fleet barely glanced up from his tactical sphere. One settlement. Primitive atmospheric domes. No orbital defenses. Estimated population. 4,200. Mostly civilians. Military contingent. Negligible. Negligible meant 23 armed personnel. Mostly ex-military colonists with outdated pulse rifles and jury-rig comms. No power d'arme. No drones. No AI support. Just men and women in patched thermal suits, breathing recycled air, watching the sky through cracked viewports. The Krell didn't send an invasion force. They sent a message. 3 drop pods, each carrying 12 elite SCAR enforcers. Bioengineered shock troops with chitinous plating, multi-spectrum vision, and reflexes calibrated to intercept hypersonic projectiles. Their mission: secure the central habitat dome, extract any data cores, and execute all adult humans as a demonstration. Children would be taken for neural imprinting, a standard procedure for assimilating useful genetic lines. The pods hit the surface at 0300 local time, punching through the ice crust like hot knives. Steam hissed into the minus 60 degrees Celsius air. The enforcers emerged, silent, scanning. Thermal signatures showed movement inside Dome Gamma. Good. They'd heard them like cattle. But then, nothing. No alarms. No panicked radio chatter. No desperate last stand at the airlock. Just silence, broken only by the groan of shifting ice and the low hum of failing life support systems. Skarn Commander Vrakth stepped forward, mandibles twitching. Scanned for traps. His second-in-command, Zorl, tapped a claw against his chest plate sensor. No energy spikes. No explosives. Atmosphere stable. They're hiding. Vrakth gave the signal. Breach protocol. They cut through the outer hatch with plasma torches. Inside, the corridor was dark, lit only by emergency strips flickering red. Frost coated the walls. Footprints led deeper, but they were old. Days old. Then they found the first body. A human male, mid-40s, slumped against a bulkhead. No wounds. No signs of struggle. Just dead. Frozen solid, eyes open, mouth slightly agape. A datapad lay in his lap, screen dark. Zorl nudged it with a claw. Suicide. No, Vraktiech growled. He was waiting. Before Zorl could ask what that meant, the floor beneath him shifted. Not collapsed, shifted, like the entire section had been mounted on silent hydraulics. With a near-silent hiss, the corridor tilted 15 degrees. The Krell, built for zero-G combat, but unaccustomed to sudden terrain manipulation on planetary surfaces, stumbled. And that's when the lights went out. Not just the emergency strips, their own ocular implants flickered. A localized EM pulse, weak but precisely timed. Just enough to blind their sensors for 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, a human can reload, aim, and fire twice. The first shot took Zorl through the joint between his neck carapace and shoulder plate, a gap only visible in motion. The second round struck a third enforcer in the knee joint, buckling him. Then came the voice, calm, almost bored, over the colony's internal comms. "Welcome to Vexor, 7 boys. Hope you packed warm socks." Gunfire erupted from 3 directions. Not wild spray. Controlled, disciplined bursts. Each shot placed with surgical precision. The Krell returned fire, shredding bulkheads, melting consoles, but hitting nothing alive. Because the humans weren't where they should be. They'd turned the entire dome into a kill box. Air vents became sniper perches. Maintenance tunnels became ambush corridors. Even the hydroponics bay, flooded with nutrient slurry, had been rigged to short-circuit if breached, creating conductive pools that grounded the Krell's bioelectric systems. One by one, the enforcers fell. Not to superior firepower, but to improvisation. A pressure valve released supercooled nitrogen, flash freezing 2 Skarn in place. A false retreat lured 4 into a decontamination chamber, which then flooded with aerosolized neuroinhibitor, developed from local lichen, harmless to humans, paralytic to Krell biology. By dawn, only Vraktiech remained. He crouched behind a shattered coolant tank, bleeding ichor from a dozen minor wounds. His comms were dead. His squad was gone. And outside the broken viewport, the sun rose over the ice plains, pink and cruel. Then he saw him. A human woman, maybe 50, wrapped in a tattered parka, standing 50 meters away on the ice. No weapon visible. Just boots, gloves, and a thermos in her hand. She unscrewed the cap, poured steaming liquid into the snow, and watched it vaporize. "You're the last one," she said, voice carrying clearly in the thin air. "You can surrender, or you can run. We'll catch you either way." Vraktiech roared, charging, not with tactics, but with rage. He covered the distance in seconds, claws extended, mandibles wide. She didn't flinch. As he leapt, the ice beneath him cracked, not naturally, but along pre-scored fracture lines. A trap laid days ago, using geothermal probes to weaken the surface in a perfect circle. He plunged into the black water below, dragged down by his own weight. She walked to the edge, peered in. "Told you to bring socks," she muttered. Back inside the dome, the survivors regrouped. 23 had become 19. Lost holding the north corridor. They wrapped the bodies in thermal blankets, marked coordinates on a slate. Then Sergeant Mara Rios, former Marine, current colony security chief, turned to her team. "They'll send more. Bigger force. Probably orbital strike next." Private Eli Chun, barely 20, wiped blood from his lip. "What do we do?" Mara smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind that says I've been here before. "We make them regret ever hearing the word human." And, deep in orbit, aboard the Krell command vessel Voidmaw, High Strategist Kale Vorn reviewed the mission logs. 23 humans. 12 elite enforcers. 0 survivors on his side. He deleted the phrase negligible threat from all future reports. Then he authorized deployment Order Sigma, full ground assault. 5,000 troops. 3 armored walkers. 1 orbital suppression beam. He still didn't understand. You don't defeat humans by sending more troops. You defeat them by never engaging in the first place. Note, this is part 1 of the story, written in approximately 1,200 words for clarity and pacing within this format. In a full 4,000-word document, This section would be expanded with deeper character moments, tactical details, environmental descriptions, internal monologues from both human and Krell perspectives, and richer world building, while maintaining the same core events and tone. The Void Maw hung in geosynchronous orbit above Vexor, 7 like a black fawn against the stars. Inside its command sanctum, High Strategist Kale Vorn stood before a holographic projection of the moon's surface, his obsidian carapace glinting under sterile violet light. The dome, Gamma Habitat, was now marked with pulsing red glyphs, infestation zone. Not settlement, not outpost, infestation. As if humanity were vermin burrowing into the flesh of order. He had authorized Deployment Order Sigma not out of rage, but necessity. Failure could not be tolerated. The Dominion's expansion relied on swift, absolute subjugation. If word spread that 23 humans had annihilated a Skarn Enforcer squad, elite warriors trained since larval stage for planetary pacification, it would seed doubt in allied species. Doubt bred resistance. Resistance bred chaos. And chaos was the only enemy the Krell truly feared. So he sent 5,000, not just infantry. He deployed the Iron Maw Walkers, 30-meter-tall biomechanical titans with plasma cannons fused to their spinal columns and legs capable of crushing rockcrete bunkers into dust. He sent atmospheric suppressors to drain oxygen from targeted zones. He even requisitioned a single neural scourge pod, a forbidden weapon designed to overload organic nervous systems within a kilometer radius. Normally reserved for rebellious hive worlds, its use here was a silent admission. We do not understand these creatures. Below, on the ice, Mara Rios watched the sky darken. She stood atop Dome Gamma's central spire, binoculars pressed to her eyes, breath frosting the lenses. The horizon shimmered, not with heat, but with distortion fields as drop ships tore through the upper atmosphere. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They're not messing around this time, said Eli Chun, crouched beside her, shivering despite 3 layers of thermal weave. Nope, Mara replied, lowering the binocs. They brought the whole damn zoo. Back inside, the colony's 19 survivors moved with grim efficiency. No panique, no speeches, just work. They'd spent the last 36 hours turning every corridor, every storage bay, every sewage pipe into a layered defense. They'd melted down non-essential machinery for scrap metal, repurposed fusion batteries into crude EMP charges, and flooded the lower levels with a slurry of water, ammonia, and conductive nanofibers scavenged from old comms arrays. It wouldn't stop bullets, but it would fry anything with an exposed circuit. Most importantly, they'd evacuated the civilians. Under cover of the first night after the Enforcer ambush, they'd guided 4,187 men, women, and children through a hidden tunnel, originally built for geothermal drilling, into a network of natural ice caves 2 kilometers east. There, buried beneath 50 meters of permafrost, they'd set up a temporary refuge with enough rations, oxygen recyclers, and medical supplies to last 6 weeks. Among them were engineers, doctors, teachers, and 12 children under 10. Mara hadn't told them everything. She didn't need to. They knew what was coming, and they trusted her to buy them time. Now, with the Krell Armada descending, she gathered her team in the command hub, a repurposed mess hall with walls lined with sandbags and flickering monitors. "Listen up," she said, voice low but carrying. "They think we're cornered. They think we'll dig in and die heroically, so we're going to disappoint them." She tapped a map projected onto a cracked screen. "We're not defending the dome. We're baiting them into it." Private Anya Petrov, ex-artillery, raised a brow. "You want them inside?" "Exactly," Mara said. "Their walkers can't fit through the airlocks. Their suppressors won't work in enclosed spaces. And if they try orbital strikes, they risk collapsing the entire structure, which means no data cores, no prisoners, no proof of victory. They need this place intact. So we let them in," Eli said slowly, "then collapse it on top of them." "Better," Mara grinned. "We let them in, then turn it into a labyrinth they can't escape." Over the next 12 hours, they executed Phase 1, the hollowing. They rigged every structural support column with shaped charges, not enough to bring the dome down, but enough to reconfigure it. Hydraulic pistons, salvaged from mining rigs, were welded into door frames. Bulkheads were fitted with magnetic locks that could seal or slide on remote command. Even the gravity stabilizers, meant to simulate Earth normal pull, were jury-rigged to fluctuate in localized zones, creating disorienting pockets of near weightlessness or double-G stress. By the time the first Krell drop pods hit the ice at 0400, Dome Gamma looked abandoned. Smoke rose from a ruptured coolant line. Lights flickered erratically. A lone distress beacon pulsed weakly on emergency frequency. Perfect. The Krell landed in perfect formation. Phalanxes of crimson-armored infantry, flanked by hulking biotanks with articulated limbs and eyeless heads scanning for threats. At their center strode Warlord Dravik, newly assigned to redeem the Enforcer's failure. His armor bore scars from 100 conquests. His voice, when he spoke, vibrated through bone conduction implants worn by every soldier under his command. "Secure the dome," he ordered. "No destruction. I want their command logs, their genetic archives, and their leader's head mounted on my wall." They breached the outer perimeter with terrifying ease. No resistance. No traps. Just echoing corridors and frozen corpses left where they fell. Too easy. Dravik's instinct screamed, but pride drowned them out. He'd faced hive mind swarms, psionic warlords, even rogue AI cults. Humans were mammals. Soft, emotional, predictable. He stepped into the central atrium and froze. The floor was gone. Not collapsed. Removed. A 30-meter-deep pit yawned beneath him, lined with jagged rebar and humming with residual energy. His front ranks tumbled in before they could react. Screams echoed, cut short by the wet crunch of impact. Then the lights died. Not just power loss, selective darkness. Only certain sectors went black, plunging squads into isolated pockets of void, while others remained lit, making them perfect targets. From the shadows came gunfire, not from fixed positions, from moving ones. Humans rappelling down service cables, dropping from ventilation shafts, sliding across gantries on makeshift zip lines. And they weren't just shooting to kill. They were hurting. A burst of fire here forced a squad toward a sealed bulkhead. A flashbang there sent another stumbling into a deck-in chamber, now flooded with paralytic mist. One Krell soldier activated his wrist-mounted scanner, only to find it broadcasting their position directly to human snipers. "Ow!" Dravik roared, blasting a ceiling panel with his plasma cannon. How are they everywhere? Because they weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like ghosts. Eli Chin clung to a maintenance rail 50 meters above the chaos, rifle braced against his shoulder. Below, a Krell officer barked orders, trying to rally his troops. Eli exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. One shot. Center mass. The officer dropped. He rappelled down, landed silently behind a fallen console, and tossed a small device, a modified sonic emitter, into a nearby corridor. It emitted a frequency that mimicked Krell distress calls. Within seconds, 3 confused enforcers rushed in, right into a crossfire from Anya and 2 others hiding in a collapsed storage room. Meanwhile, Mara moved like a shadow through the upper ducts. She carried no rifle, just a combat knife and a satchel of thermite charges. Her target, the main power nexus. Not to destroy it, but to redirect it. She reached the junction box, sliced through insulation with her blade, and rerouted auxiliary lines into the dome's climate control system. Then, she triggered a sequence that flooded Sector 7 with superheated steam, hot enough to scald Krell exoskeletons, but harmless to humans in insulated suits. Down below, Warlord Dravik finally understood. This wasn't a battle. It was a lesson, and humanity was the teacher. He activated his command override, ordering all units to fall back to the entrance. But the doors wouldn't open. Magnetic seals had engaged. The dome was now a sealed tomb, with over 800 Krell trapped inside. Above, Mara watched through a cracked viewport as the first Iron Maw walker stomped toward the dome, its plasma cannon charging. "They're gonna blow the whole thing," Eli whispered over comms. "Let them try," Mara said. She pressed a final button on her wrist pad. Deep beneath the dome, the geothermal taps, carefully calibrated over days, released a controlled surge of pressurized steam into the foundation struts. The ground trembled, ice cracked, and the entire structure tilted just 5 degrees. But 5 degrees was enough. The Iron Maw's foot slipped on the suddenly unstable surface. It stumbled, its cannon firing wildly into the sky. Before it could recover, Mara triggered the charges on the dome's eastern support column. With a groan that shook the tundra, the dome collapsed inward, not outward, not explosively, but like a closing fist. Steel beams folded. Reinforced glass shattered inward, and the 800 Krell inside were buried under a mountain of their own arrogance. The walker, off balance, toppled sideways into a crevasse, its reactor core sputtering. Silence returned to Vexor 7. Inside the ice caves 2 kilometers away, a child asked, "Are they gone?" Her mother held her close. For now. Back in orbit, High Strategist Kale Vorn stared at the sensor feed. 800 troops, 1 walker, all lost. And the humans? Still unaccounted for. He turned to his tactical AI. Deploy the Scourge pod. But, strategist, the machine intoned civilian signatures detected in subsurface caverns. Neural Scourge will kill them all. Vorn's mandibles clicked once. Then let them die. Better dead than witnesses. The pod detached from the void maw, streaking toward the surface like a falling star. But Mara Rios was already moving. She'd anticipated this, because humans don't just fight wars. They study them. And she'd been studying Krell doctrine for years, ever since first contact rumors began filtering through black market comms channels. She knew they'd escalate. She knew they'd use forbidden weapons. So she prepared a counter. Not with tech, with terrain. As the Scourge pod entered the atmosphere, Mara and her team sprinted across the ice toward the geothermal vents, natural fissures that vented superheated gas from the moon's core. They'd spent days mapping them, reinforcing access tunnels, and planting resonance charges along fault lines. When the pod reached 5,000 meters, Mara detonated the charges. The ground didn't just shake, it sang. A harmonic frequency, tuned to the exact resonant frequency of the Scourge pod's containment field, rippled through the crust. The pod's shielding flickered, failed. Before it could deploy its payload, it slammed into the ice, burying itself deep. Harmless. For now. But Vorn didn't know that. All he saw was the pod vanishing from sensors. All he heard was silence from the surface. And for the first time in his long, merciless career, Kale Vorn felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, doubt. He ordered a full retreat. Not because he'd lost, but because he no longer understood the rules of the game. And in the ice caves, Mara Rios allowed herself one moment of rest. She sat on a crate, sipped lukewarm coffee from a dented mug, and looked at her team, exhausted, wounded, but alive. "We bought them time," she said softly. Ili nodded. "What now?" Mara gazed toward the surface, where stars glittered cold and distant. "Now we wait," she said. "And we hope someone out there heard what happened here. Because if the galaxy learned that a handful of humans could break a Krell invasion with nothing but grit, ingenuity, and the will to outthink their enemies, then maybe, just maybe, humanity wouldn't be prey anymore. Maybe they'd be the hunters." And somewhere in a distant star system, a battered human freighter picked up a faint, encrypted burst transmission from Vexor 7. The message was simple. "Tell Earth we held the line." The freighter's captain, a grizzled spacer named Reyes, played it twice. Then he altered course, not toward safety, toward war. The freighter Wayfarer's hope wasn't built for war. It was a rust bucket hauler with patched hull plates, a temperamental fusion core, and a cargo hold that still smelled faintly of rotting soy protein bricks. But Captain Elias Reyes had flown her through ion storms, pirate ambushes, and 3 customs inspections that should have grounded her for life. She wasn't fast, she wasn't stealthy, but she was his. And, right now, she carried the most dangerous cargo in human space, truth. The encrypted burst from Vexor 7 had been short, just 12 seconds of audio, buried inside a fake meteorological ping. But Reyes knew real desperation when he heard it. He'd served 2 tours on Mars during the Belt Uprisings. He'd seen what happened when colonies were left to die. So instead of routing the message through official channels, where it might vanish into bureaucratic silence, he did something reckless. He broadcast it, not publicly, not yet, but to every independent colony, smuggler hub, and fringe world militia within 50 light-years. He piggybacked it onto commercial data streams, disguised it as firmware updates, even slipped it into entertainment feeds under the guise of a new sci-fi drama. Within 72 hours, the Vexor transmission was echoing through backwater bars, mining outposts, and black market comms dens from Proxima Outpost to the Cygnus Rim. And people listened, because the voice on that recording, calm, weary, but unbroken, wasn't begging for help. It was declaring something. A line had been drawn, and humanity, scattered and fractured as it was, began to remember who they were. Meanwhile, aboard the Krell command vessel Void Maw, High Strategist Kale Vorn faced consequences. The Dominion Council had summoned him, not via comm, but through a neural summons that burned like ice in his cerebellum. Failure was one thing. Inexplicable failure was heresy. The loss of an enforcer squad could be dismissed as overconfidence. But 800 troops? An Iron Maw walker? A Skerjbot? All vanished on a frozen rock with no orbital defenses? You allowed primitives to humiliate the Dominion. Came the voice of Elder Matriarch Zyra, her presence projected into his mind like shards of glass. You gave them legend. Vorn bowed his head. I underestimated their capacity for asymmetric warfare. Underestimation is a luxury for victors, Zyra hissed. You are neither. You will return to Vexor 7. Not with soldiers. With annihilation. Glass the surface. Vaporize the ice. Leave nothing but crater and memory. But Vorn hesitated. The humans, they do not fight like other species. They use terrain, psychology, even their own mortality as weapons. If we destroy the moon, we learn nothing. And if others hear of our retreat, then let them hear, Zyra cut in, cold finality in her tone. Let them know the price of defiance. Fear is the only language these mammals understand. The order was sealed. Yet, as Vorn returned to the bridge, a flicker of unease remained. He reviewed the battle logs again, frame by frame. The way the humans moved. The precision of their traps. The patience. This wasn't guerrilla warfare. It was orchestrated chaos. Every action had a counteraction planned 3 steps ahead. And then he saw it. A pattern in the thermal signatures during the dome collapse. Not random movement. Evacuation routes. They hadn't just survived. They'd saved their civilians before the first shot was fired. These weren't desperate survivors. They were professionals. Which meant Vexor 7 wasn't just a colony. It was a test. And humanity had passed. Back on Earth, the message reached ears that mattered. Not politicians. Not corporate CEOs. But the silent cohort. A shadow network of retired special forces operators, intelligence analysts, and battlefield surgeons who'd quietly maintained readiness since the last interstellar skirmish 20 years prior. They called themselves ghosts with pensions, but their databases were live, their comms secure, and their loyalty absolute. To humanity, not any flag. When a Vexor transmission hit their servers, they convened, not in a bunker, but in a virtual space coded with analog encryption so old it couldn't be cracked by quantum AI. Among them was General Eris Thorn, former commander of the Titan Siege, now living off-grid in the Patagonian highlands. His face appeared on the feed, beard streaked gray, eyes sharp as flint. They held against a Krell ground assault, said Dr. Lena Cho, ex-military xenopsychologist. That's impossible. Not impossible, Thorn corrected. Just unprecedented. The Krell don't lose infantry engagements. Ever. Their doctrine assumes total dominance. So what broke it? Ingenuity, said Colonel Rafe Malik, who'd lost an arm fighting Martian separatists. Humans don't need better tech. We need better ideas. Thorne leaned forward. Then we give them more ideas and more hands. Within hours, the cohort activated Protocol Chimera, a dormant contingency plan designed for existential threats. It didn't call for fleets or armies. It called for individuals. Names were pulled from classified files. Coordinates sent via dead-drop satellites. One-way tickets booked on civilian liners heading toward the Cygnus Arm. Among the first to respond was Kai Volkov, a former orbital drop Marine who'd gone rogue after refusing an order to fire on a refugee convoy. He'd been living as a deep-sea welder on Europa, fixing submersibles in crushing darkness. When the coded message arrived, embedded in a phishing report, he smiled for the first time in years. Then there was Dr. Amara Singh, bioengineer and expert in non-lethal neuroinhibitors. She'd been developing agricultural pheromones on Ganymede when the alert came. She packed her lab into a reinforced case and boarded the next shuttle without telling anyone goodbye. And Jean Wraith Sato, a cyber warfare specialist who disappeared after exposing a corporate AI that was manipulating election outcomes. He surfaced in a Bangkok data den, cracked the cohort challenge cipher in 47 seconds, and whispered, "Tell Thorne I'm in." They weren't soldiers anymore. Not officially, but they were warriors. And warriors answer when the tribe is threatened. Their destination, Outpost Theta, a derelict listening station orbiting a dead star near Krell-controlled space. From there, they'd coordinate support for Vexor 7 and prepare for what came next. On Vexor 7, Mara Rios knew the calm wouldn't last. She stood at the mouth of the ice cave, watching the sky. The Krell had retreated, but they'd left sensor buoys in high orbit. Passive, silent, waiting. They'll be back, Eli said, joining her. Bigger this time. Probably, Mara agreed. But we bought weeks, maybe months. And then? She turned to him, eyes tired but steady. Then, we make sure someone else is ready to fight when we fall. She'd already sent a second transmission. This one longer, packed with tactical data, Krell weak points, and schematics of their armor joints. Encrypted with a key only the silent cohort would recognize. Now, deep in the caves, the survivors trained the civilians. Not to be soldiers, but to be resilient. Old Man Henderson, a retired physics teacher, taught kids how to build signal jammers from scrap radios. Nursley showed teenagers how to apply tourniquets using only thermal tape and wire. Even the youngest children learned to identify Krell patrol patterns by listening to ice vibrations through hollow reeds. This wasn't just survival. It was legacy. One night, as auroras danced overhead, Anya Petrov sat with Mara by a low-burning heater. "You think anyone got the message?" she asked. Mara stared into the flames. "If even one person heard it, then we won." Light years away, Kai Volkov stepped off a cargo hauler onto the skeletal frame of Outpost Theta. Zero gravity tugged at his boots as magnetic clamps engaged. Inside the station, Thorne waited. "No uniforms," Thorne said. "No ranks. Just skills." Kai nodded. "Good." I hated saluting. As more operatives arrived, 12 in total, they began building something the galaxy had never seen. A human-resistant cell designed not to conquer, but to inspire. They analyzed the Vexor data, discovered that Krell bioarmor was vulnerable to ultrasonic resonance at 18.7 kilohertz, a frequency easily generated by modified mining drills. Learned that their neural implants could be disrupted by pulsed microwave bursts from old satellite dishes. Found that their fear of unpredictability could be weaponized through psychological ops. Fake transmissions, phantom troop movements, even broadcasting human lullabies on enemy frequencies to sow confusion. "We don't need to beat them everywhere," Thorne declared. "We just need to make them afraid to land anywhere." Meanwhile, the Krell prepared their final solution. The Void Maw returned to Vexor 7, not alone, but escorted by 2 Oblivion-class dreadnoughts, each capable of sustained planetary bombardment. In their holds, fusion warheads waited, enough to melt the polar caps, boil the subsurface ocean, and leave the moon a glowing cinder. High strategist Vorn stood on the observation deck, watching the pale or below. "This ends today," he murmured. But as the dreadnoughts powered their main batteries, something unexpected happened. A distress call erupted from the edge of the system. Not human. Krell, one of their supply convoys, carrying neural inhibitors and biofuel, had been ambushed near the asteroid belt. No attackers seen, just silent, surgical strikes. Ships disabled, not destroyed. Cargo stolen. Crews found alive but disoriented, babbling about ghosts in vacuum suits. Then, another report. A forward listening post went dark. Its last transmission showed blurred footage of figures moving in zero-G, planting charges with terrifying precision. Then, another, and another. All along the Krell frontier, small, coordinated strikes were happening. No declarations of war. No demands. Just disruption. Vorn's comms officer approached, trembling. "Strategist, the attacks. They're using human tactics. But faster. Smarter." Vorn's blood ran cold. They hadn't just defended Vexor 7. They'd started a war. And humanity wasn't fighting with fleets. They were fighting with cells. Scattered. Invisible. Unstoppable. He turned to his weapons officer. "Delay bombardment. Full sensor sweep. I want every anomaly flagged." But it was too late. Because while the Krell looked down at Vexor 7, humanity was already behind them. On Outpost Theta, Thorn watched the Krell fleet hesitate on a screen. "They're scared," Kai said, arms crossed. "No, torne directive." They're confused. And confusion is the first crack in tyranny. He opened a channel, encrypted, narrow beam, aimed directly at Vexor 7. "Mara Rios," he said. "This is General Eris Thorn. You're not alone anymore." 3 seconds of static. Then, her voice, rough but clear, "Took you long enough, sir." Thorn smiled. "Welcome to the rebellion." And across the galaxy, in hidden bunkers, drifting hulks, and forgotten colonies, humans began to rise. Not with banners. With wrenches, rifles, code, and courage. Because the Krell had made one fatal mistake. They thought war was about strength. But humans knew the truth. War is about will. And no species in the galaxy had more of it than Homo sapiens. The Krell did not understand silence. To them, silence meant absence of threat, of resistance, of consequence. Their entire doctrine was built on overwhelming presence, the thunder of drop pods, the hum of dreadnoughts, the synchronized march of 10,000 boots shaking the ground. Silence was surrender, or death. So when their orbital sensors detected nothing but static from Vexor 7 for 3 full cycles, no transmissions, no thermal spikes, no movement, they assumed victory. The humans had either perished in the caves or fled into the void. The moon was theirs to glass at leisure. High Strategist Kale Vorn ordered the bombardment sequence initiated. But as the Void Maw's primary cannon charged, a weapon capable of vaporizing a city in one shot, the ship's AI issued an anomaly alert. Gravitational distortion detected. It intoned. Origin, Lagrange point 4. Vorn frowned. Asteroid. No. Artificial mass. Signature matches human freighter class. Impossible. No human vessel could survive this close to a Krell fleet undetected. Their stealth tech was primitive, mostly radar-absorbent paint and engine dampeners, useless against gravimetric scanners. Yet there was a single blip drifting like space debris. Then another appeared, and another. Within minutes, 12 contacts bloomed around the fleet, silent, unpowered, tumbling slowly as if abandoned. "Mines?" Vorn asked. "Negative. No explosive signatures. But they're emitting low-frequency pulses. Harmonic resonance matching Vexor 7 geothermal vents." Vorn's mandibles tightened. "They're using the planet itself as a weapon. Deploy interceptors. Destroy them." Krell fighters launched, sleek, insectoid craft with plasma lances and predictive targeting. They closed in on the first derelict, weapons hot. But before they could fire, the derelict spoke. Not with comms, with sound. A deep, resonant tone, 18.7 kilohertz, rippled through the vacuum, carried not by air, but by modulated graviton waves. It struck the lead fighter like a physical blow. The pilot screamed as his neural implant overloaded. His biosuit spasmed. The ship veered wildly, colliding with its wingmate in a silent explosion of shrapnel. One by one, the derelicts activated. Each emitted a different frequency, some targeting Krell exoskeleton joints, others disrupting shipboard AI logic gates, a few even mimicking Krell command codes to trigger false alarms. Chaos erupted. Fighters collided. Dreadnought shields flickered as harmonic feedback surged through their power grids. On the Void Maw, lights dimmed. Life support stuttered. And then silence again. The derelicts went dark. But the damage was done. Vorn stared at the tactical display. 2 fighters destroyed. 3 more disabled. Minor system failures across the fleet. Nothing catastrophic, but deeply unnerving. Because this wasn't an attack. It was a message. We are everywhere, even in your blind spots. On Outpost Theta, Eris Thorn watched the feed from the derelicts. Old cargo haulers, patched together by engineers who'd once serviced lunar tugs. Each had been stripped down, fitted with resonant emitters powered by salvage fusion cells, and programmed to drift into position over weeks. They worked, Kai Volkov said, arms crossed. Of course they did, Thorn replied. Humans don't need to hit hard. We just need to hit smart. Their real weapon wasn't the emitters. It was time. While the Krell focused on Vexor 7, Thorn's team had spent months seeding the system with dormant assets. Not bombs. Not drones. Just ideas wrapped in metal. Now, Phase 2 began. Amara Singh activated her creation, Project Lullaby. From hidden transmitters on captured Krell supply ships, she broadcast a modified version of a 20th century Earth lullaby, Hush, Little Baby, encoded with subsonic pulses that triggered anxiety responses in Krell neurology. Their biology, evolved for hive coordination, interpreted the irregular rhythm as a sign of system failure. Within hours, reports flooded Krell command channels. Soldiers experiencing disorientation, paranoia, even hallucinations of whispering ghosts. Meanwhile, Gene Wraith Sato infiltrated the Krell logistics network, not through brute force hacking, but by exploiting a flaw in their supply chain AI. He introduced phantom orders, extra coolant shipments to non-existent outposts, redundant armor plating for already overstocked bases, even falsified maintenance logs that grounded half their scout fleet for scheduled diagnostics. The Krell weren't being defeated. They were being distracted. And distraction in war is death. Back on Vexor 7, Mara Rios knew the reprieve wouldn't last. She stood in the main cavern, now transformed into a command center. Maps covered the ice walls. Children practiced Morse code with tapping stones. Elders taught teenagers how to jury-rig radios for broken heaters. They'd received Thorn's message. Hope was real, but hope didn't stop orbital cannons. We can't stay here forever, Eli said, reviewing sensor logs. Their buoys are getting smarter. One of these days, they'll triangulate our heat signature. Mara nodded. Then we move. Where? The whole moon's frozen. Not the whole moon, she said, pointing to a geological survey on the wall. There's a geothermal vent system under the southern ridge. Deep. Huh. And shielded by magnetic anomalies that scramble scans. It was risky. The tunnels were unstable. Oxygen levels unpredictable. But it was their only chance. That night, they began the evacuation. 4,000 civilians, plus 19 fighters, moved in absolute silence through ice-carved passages. They left decoys behind, thermal blankets shaped like bodies, looping audio of coughs and whispers, even fake CO2 vents to mimic life signs. By dawn, the caves were empty, and deep below the surface, humanity vanished again. In orbit, the Krell finally noticed. Thermal signatures from the caves dropped to ambient. No movement, no signals. Warlord Dravik, reinstated after begging for redemption, urged caution. They've done this before. They're luring us in. But Vorn was done with caution. Deploy the Scourge pod manually, he ordered. Land it inside the cave entrance. Activate on proximity. This time, there would be no harmonic tricks. No geothermal interference. The pod would sit inside the target zone, immune to external disruption. A dropship carried the pod down, landing precisely at the cave mouth. Krell engineers secured it, armed the neural pulse emitter, and retreated. 10 seconds later, the pod detonated. A wave of energy pulsed outward, silent, invisible, lethal to any nervous system within 800 meters. Sensors confirmed total biological shutdown in the zone. Vorn allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. But then, the pod's internal recorder transmitted its final data. No human remains. No blood. Just empty tunnels and a single, scorched thermos lying near the entrance. Inside it, frozen solid, was a note written on thermal paper. You keep looking for us in the places you think we'd hide. Try looking where you'd never go. Vorn crushed the datapad in his claw. They weren't hiding. They were advancing. Light years away, the human resistance grew. Colonies that once paid tribute to the Krell began sabotaging supply lines. Smugglers rerouted shipments to hidden rebel caches. Even neutral species, long cowed into silence, started whispering about the humans who broke the Dominion. On Proxima Outpost, a dock worker disabled a Krell patrol ship by pouring sugar into its coolant system. On Cygnus Prime, schoolchildren painted murals of Mara Rios on public walls, calling her the Ice Ghost. And in the shadows, Thorn's network expanded. New cells formed on Mars, Titan, even Earth's own orbital rings. Each trained in asymmetric warfare, each equipped with open-source schematics for Krell countermeasures. They called themselves the Echo, because every action they took echoed back to Vexor 7, proving that one stand could ignite a galaxy. But the Krell weren't idle. Elder Matriarch Zyra, furious at Vorn's repeated failures, authorized Project Purge, a galaxy-wide hunt for human settlements, backed by psychic trackers bred to sense human brainwave patterns. Entire star systems were placed under quarantine. Suspected sympathizers were executed without trial. Fear spread, yet so did defiance. Because humans had learned something the Krell never would. You cannot kill an idea. And the idea of freedom, of fighting back against impossible odds, was now burning brighter than any star. Deep beneath Vexor 7's southern ice, Mara Rios listened to a faint signal on a scavenge comm unit. It was Thorn. The Krell are hunting us everywhere, he said. But we're hitting them harder. Soon, they'll have to choose. Keep chasing ghosts or defend their own empire. Mara smiled. Let them try. She looked around the geothermal chamber. Steam rising from cracks in the rock. Children sleeping on insulated mats. Her team sharpening blades and checking fuses. They were tired, wounded, outnumbered, but they were winning, because the Krell still thought this was a battle for territory. But Mara knew the truth. This was a battle for belief, and as long as one human stood unbroken in the dark, the galaxy would remember what it meant to be free. The Krell made their final mistake not in strategy, but in assumption. They believed humanity was a species to be cataloged, contained, and eventually erased, a brief anomaly in the grand march of cosmic order. They studied human biology, reverse-engineered captured weapons, even analyzed intercepted entertainment streams for behavioral patterns. But they never grasped the core truth that had carried Homo sapiens from African savannas to interstellar void. Humans do not fight for territory. They fight for each other. And when you threaten what they love, they stop being soldiers. They become legends. High strategist Kale Vorn stood on the bridge of the Void Maw, staring at a galaxy map now dotted with red alerts. Human resistance cells had struck 17 Krell outposts in the last cycle. Not with fleets, never with fleets, but with precision, patience, and terrifying creativity. A water purification plant sabotaged with engineered algae that clogged biofilters. A command relay station disabled by a single operative who'd posed as a sanitation drone for 3 weeks. Even in nursery habitat, where Krell larvae were grown in nutrient vats, had been infiltrated and evacuated by humans who left behind only a message carved into the central console: "We don't kill children." Remember that. That act alone shattered Krell morale, because mercy was incomprehensible to them. In their doctrine, weakness was purged. Compassion was inefficiency. Yet these soft-skinned mammals had spared their young, while dismantling their empire piece by piece. Elder Matriarch Zyra summoned Vorn one last time. "The Council has lost patience." Her voice echoed in his mind, colder than vacuum. "You will deploy the Worldbreaker Array. Target all known human settlements. Glass them simultaneously. Let the ashes serve as a monument to futility." The Worldbreaker Array was the Dominion's ultimate weapon, a network of orbital platforms capable of synchronizing fusion beams to ignite a planet's crust from pole to pole. It had never been used, not because it was too destructive, but because it was wasteful. The Krell preferred conquest, not annihilation. But now, fear had replaced logic. Vorn bowed. It will be done. Yet as he turned to issue the order, a new alert flashed across every screen on the bridge. Priority 1 intrusion. Origin, Earth system. Not a ship, not a weapon. A broadcast. Unencrypted. Unstoppable. Beamed directly into every Krell comm channel, every civilian feed, every neural implant across 300 star systems. And it began with a voice. Mata Hughes. She stood in a cavern lit by bioluminescent fungi, wrapped in a patched thermal coat, face gaunt but eyes blazing. Behind her stood Eli, Anya, Old Man Henderson, Nurse Lee, and dozens of civilians, children included. "This is Mara Rios of Vexer 7, she said, calm as ice. "You think we're hiding. You think we're broken. You think we're alone." She stepped forward, closer to the camera. "We're not." The feed cut to footage from across the galaxy. On Mars, miners detonated charges beneath a Krell garrison, then raised a tattered UN flag over the rubble. On Titan, engineers rerouted atmospheric processors to flood a docking bay with liquid nitrogen, freezing an entire invasion force in place. On Proxima Outpost, teenagers hacked public speakers to play "Hush, Little Baby" as Krell patrols covered their heads in agony. Then came Thorn, standing on Outpost Theta, flanked by Kai, Amara, Jean, and others. "We are not your enemy," Thorn said. "We are your reckoning. You came to our worlds thinking we'd kneel. Instead, we taught you how to bleed." The broadcast ended with a single image, a child's drawing, scanned and transmitted from Vexer 7. Crude crayon lines showed stick-figure humans standing on a moon, facing giant black shapes. Above them, written in shaky letters, "We are still here." Silence fell across the Krell fleet. For the first time in recorded history, a Dominion vessel experienced mass psychological distress. Soldiers reported nightmares. Commanders questioned orders. Even the AI cores began flagging anomalies in crew behavior. Elevated heart rates, erratic decision-making, unauthorized comms activity. Because the broadcast hadn't just shown resistance. It had shown unity. And unity was the one thing the hive-minded Krell could not replicate or defeat. Vorn did not deploy the Worldbreaker Array. Instead, he did something no Krell strategist had ever done. He opened a secure channel to Earth. Not to threaten, not to demand surrender. To ask, why? His translated voice crackled over the comm. "Why do you fight when you cannot win?" Mara answered, not from Vexer 7, but from a hidden relay near Jupiter. "Because winning isn't the point," she said. "Surviving is. And remembering. And making sure the next generation doesn't have a hide in caves." She paused. "You think we're animals. But animals run when cornered. We dig in. We build. We teach our kids how to fight and how to heal. That's not weakness. That's evolution." Vorn had no reply, because for the first time, he saw humanity not as prey, but as something else. Something the universe had shaped differently. Not better, not worse. just other. And otherness in a galaxy ruled by conformity was revolutionary. In the weeks that followed, the impossible happened. Krell outposts began reporting defections, not of soldiers, but of engineers, scientists, even historians who smuggled data on Dominion weaknesses to human cells. Whispers spread of a secret faction within the Krell elite calling themselves the Obsidian Doubt, who argued that humanity should be studied, not destroyed. The Dominion Council declared martial law. Executions doubled, but the cracks were spreading. Meanwhile, humanity prepared for the next phase. Thorne's network evolved into the Free Systems Accord, a coalition of colonies, freelancers, and former Krell subjects united not by government but by choice. They built ships in asteroid belts, forged alliances with neutral species, and developed new weapons based on the lessons of Vexor 7. But their greatest weapon remained unchanged. It was the story of 23 humans who held a moon against an empire. The story of a thermos left in the snow. The story of a lullaby that broke warriors. Stories traveled faster than dreadnoughts. And soon, even alien species long subjugated by the Krell began rising, inspired not by human strength, but by human refusal to disappear. Years later, historians would mark this era as the turning. Not because humanity won a great battle, but because they changed the rules of war itself. No longer was victory measured in territory seized or enemies killed. It was measured in hope preserved, in dignity defended, in the quiet courage of a teacher showing a child how to tie a tourniquet, while bombs fell from the sky. On Vexor 7, the ice eventually melted, not from orbital fire, but from geothermal vents carefully redirected by human hands. Greenhouses rose from the permafrost. Children played on fields once soaked in blood. And atop the rebuilt Dome Gamma, a simple monument stood, 23 names etched into steel recovered from Krell drop pod. Mara Rios never left. She became a teacher, then a counselor, then a myth. But every evening, she walked to the edge of the settlement, looked up at the stars, and whispered the same words. We held the line. And somewhere in a distant system, a young Krell scholar, raised on forbidden human literature, translated those words into her native tongue and wrote them in her journal. They did not conquer us. They reminded us what it means to be alive. The galaxy would never be the same, because humanity's most lethal warriors were never the ones with the biggest guns. They were the ones who refused to stop believing in each other, in tomorrow, in the unbreakable truth that even in the darkest void, life finds a way, and so do we.